All right, for today's video review, we're going to be taking a look at Transformers Generations Legacy Evolution Scraphook, who is, he's a pretty cool figure. He's been one that I've been excited about for a little while since they first announced him. Basically, what they're starting to do here is they're taking the whole sort of weaponizer, modulator, fossilizer gimmick from the War for Cybertron trilogy, and they're applying that concept to Junkions, which I think is a pretty cool idea, and it fits with the Junkions super well, just because, traditionally the Junkions have always kind of been cobbled together from scrap and asymmetrical and stuff like that, like a lot of the modulator things are, and their arms fall off and they put them back on and stuff like that. So I think it works pretty well with this concept. Now, Scraphook here does not turn into a motorcycle like Junkions traditionally do. He turns into this kind of a Mad Maxy looking tow truck, which I think is a pretty cool looking alt mode. We have seen images of the next one that we are getting that is going to be a motorcycle, and on the poster for Legacy Evolution, we've seen some images of ones that look like might be our other ones. Like, for example, there's one that looks kind of a suspicious amount like Lockdown from Transformers Animated, but done in the Junkion colors. So what I'm guessing that they're going to do with that figure is, as a pre-tool, basically, they're going to do that mold as a Junkion and then retool it into Lockdown, which, if you think about it, kind of makes sense for Lockdown as well, because in Transformers Animated, he had this whole thing going on where he was constantly replacing his body parts and upgrading himself. So it kind of makes sense to do him as this sort of semi-modulator thing. But yeah, that'll be exciting. And I say semi-modulator because the interesting thing about Scraphook, and it seems like they're doing this with the other ones as well, is he does do the whole modulator gimmick, but you don't actually have to parts form him at all to transform him into robot mode, aside from just taking off a couple weapons parts, which is pretty, that's about as parts formy as most modern figures are. So I don't really count that. So that's pretty cool. I will say that because he does it that way, the actual modulator play pattern of him isn't quite as fun as the previous ones that we've gotten, the base guys or the weaponizers. I'm guessing that he's going to be more interesting once we actually get more of these Junkions, because it seems like part of the whole reason for the modulator gimmick with them is to mix and match the vehicle modes. So with him right now, since there's no one really else for him to interact with, it doesn't really work super well. You can take the front of the car off here, and they've advertised that if you split this down the middle, then you're supposed to be using these peg holes to plug this onto the the Wave 2 motorcycle to be a sidecar, which is a cool idea, or plug in the front of the axles of the motorcycle here to have this weird sort of again, very Mad Maxy, cobbled together vehicle mode look. And I think that will be fun once we get a few more of the Deluxe guys. But as of right now, since he's the only one, there's not really as much you can do just with himself as you could do with the previous sort of modulator gimmick guys. So whatever. He's still a pretty fun figure just on his own, even without that gimmick. But I will say, in terms of always really liking the modulators, I did find him a little bit disappointing in that regard. But yeah, no, he looks pretty good in his vehicle mode here. Lots of nice detail. He rolls pretty well, although it doesn't visually look like he's rolling, because he's doing that thing where only the tires turn, not the hubcaps, which I understand why they did that, because, they wanted to put weapon ports on here so you could actually stick weapons off of his shoulders and legs in robot mode. And if those parts rotated loosely, then that would be kind of a nightmare. But it looks a little weird, but it's not the end of the world. I'd say, ironically, the one part about Scraphook that I don't really feel fits super well in either of his modes is the actual hook section. I just wish it extended out a little bit further, because right now it kind of just I don't know, it gets too close to this spare wheel that he has going on here, because they gave him this spare tire to be, a kind of more traditional Junkion wheel. And the only place to put it is on the back here, which kind of runs into the hook. They can both fit there. It just visually looks a little bit cramped. The hook itself, you can obviously take off, and you can take off the hook if you want and kind of rotate it around and put it in either orientation. And generally, that's how I'd like to put the hook, because then you can imagine that it could actually extend down and hook to something, but it's even more cramped up like that. So I usually leave it the other way. I don't know. I wish that they either gave this thing a little bit of like articulation or just sculpted it so it extended out further, like horizontally, rather than sticking so far up. I just think that would have been a little bit better, but you know, not really the end of the world there. Either way, I think he's pretty cool. And what's kind of neat is like, you know, if you wanted to get multiple of these guys, like if you got 4 of them, you could plug these on to kind of give him the more traditional Junkion wheels and have it be like that. Now, this is maybe an area where the actual hubcaps rotating would have been nice so that you could actually, you know, have the wheels turn like that and have it actually function. Like they can rotate because it's just a, you know, peg hole connection, but it's not, you know, loose. So I don't know, that would have been pretty cool. But then again, you would have literally had to buy 4 of these guys to make that work anyway. So I don't know that I would have even done that. So it's probably better that they did the wheels the way they did. But either way, in terms of comparisons in this mode, for the standard one, here he is with Kingdom Sideswipe. And for another pickup truck comparison, I was thinking, it's like, is this really the last pickup truck that we've gotten in Generations? Is Combiner Wars? That seems like I must have missed one in there somewhere. But here he is with Combiner Wars Off-Road, just for another pickup truck comparison. And then here he is with the 2 other modern Junkions that we have from Studio Series. And obviously right now it's a little bit like, one of these things is not like the other, because like he's smaller than they are and turns into a truck, which looks extra ridiculous because the Junkions turn into giant motorcycles. So it's like, in scale, that's I guess accurate, because they're supposed to be the height they are in robot mode and they're supposed to ride each other. But like, it just looks a little weird. I think this will look less weird when we have a few more guys to kind of add variety to the Junkion troops here, rather than these 2 guys who are literally the same mold, and then this one who looks nothing like them. But for now, they look okay together. In terms of transformation, like I said, the only bits of parts forming that you really have to do are taking off the little hook here and then taking off the spare tire. And that's really it. I mean, these parts kind of move around, but we'll kind of get to that when we get there. But yeah, to start off the transformation, you want to take these panels on the side and they kind of hook under the front sections here and tab in right there. So you just want to rotate them up just like that. Then you want to take this whole back section here and kind of split it here at the what will be the arms, the kind of bed of the pickup truck, and rotate this out to the side, and then rotate the arms out like that. Now, this is a point where these will frequently come off, but you can do it without that happening. You just have to kind of be careful with it. And so you just want to bring them down like that. For the arms here, you want to rotate them so that this bit faces forward, and then rotate the hand so that, you know, it's in line with the elbow there. And on this side, sometimes what will happen, and it's gotten a little bit better since I first gotten it, but sometimes like the swivel joint is so tight that sometimes it'll just kind of like twist the elbow off of that joint there. Like I said, I kind of had to, you know, purposefully do it that time, so it's loosened up a little bit, but that is kind of annoying that the you know, the swivel is so tight that the elbow joint just doesn't really have the strength to stay on there a lot of the time. But you know, that's really the one kind of big joint problem that I have with this guy, is just those elbows. But it's not the end of the world. Then you want to take this piece here, which will be his chest plate, and kind of rotate it up just like this for now, kind of get the arms out of the way. Then you want to take this whole section, and it'll rotate up like this on this joint, and then you want to take the head and rotate it out like that so that you can bring this up, and then you want to just spread these sort of like brown armature pieces enough to like bring this over so that they can tab into the side of that piece with the head on it, and just lock all together like that. Then what's kind of cool is you take these panels back here and you rotate them back in, and they'll kind of interlock with each other to give him 2 peg holes on the back. And that's a really neat way of doing that. You can just bring down the arms, rotate them around at the waist, separate the legs here like that, and then take the feet, and they'll kind of like double hinge down from here. This whole panel becomes his foot, and you want to kind of bring it down like that. You can kind of adjust this how you like. I usually try to, you know, bring it as far forward on this armature as I can, just so that, you know, the heels don't stick out as ridiculously. Like it's still a little bit ridiculous, the kind of footprint that he has, and especially because there's nothing else back here supporting it. But I just think that looks the best if you like bring that as far forward as it can go, so his feet are a little bit more centered. And yeah, for all intents and purposes, there you have a Scraphook in his robot mode. Let me just adjust the camera here a bit. Now, there are a few options here for the robot mode. For example, these sort of like tailpipes here are separate pieces that you can unplug. And what I generally like to do is I like to rotate them around and plug them into the wheels up like this, so they sit up on his shoulders. I just think that looks a little bit cooler. But, you know, again, with the whole like modulator thing, you can do really whatever you want with them. You could put them on his wrists. You could have him like hold them as like weird weapons. But I just think they look best over here. And that is one area in which it's nice that the wheels don't rotate, so you can actually do that. You can, with these things, I usually put the spare tire on his arm. What they want you to do with the hook is to plug it onto his arm like this, which I just don't think it looks very good like that. Like, maybe if it was, like I said before, extended more outward rather than like, you know, jutting out like that, it would look better. But I think it just looks a little weird and kind of like awkwardly sticking off his arm like that. So what I usually do is I'll just plug it onto one of the two spots on the back here. Since the peg is asymmetrical for how it plugs into the arm in vehicle mode, I usually plug it into that one. So it doesn't sit totally center, but it sits a bit more center. And, you know, I'm fine with that. I think that looks good. Another thing that he does have is on his legs here, you can actually pull out these little engine bits to have them be sort of weapons for him. And then you can kind of adjust, like, you know, you can bring his feet even more far forward when they're not there, though I don't think that looks like a lot better. I usually try to keep them center anyway. Yeah, these are okay. It feels like they're just parts for the sake of being parts. Like when you plug them into his hands, it's just like, yeah, I guess those are little pistols or something, but they don't really look like anything specific. So maybe they'll be useful in like other builds, or like, you know, at least now there's a little cavity in here if you want to use one of these parts to be a sidecar for another motorcycle. But it's a little weird. I usually just leave them on there and kind of forget about them. But, you know, in terms of the modular thing, at least there's some more parts that you can kind of mess around with. But yeah, no, I really like his robot mode look. He definitely looks a lot like a Junkion. He has this nice sort of you know, asymmetrical face with the eye patch on one side and kind of a sculpted but not painted little, I don't know, goatee thing going on there. So yeah, I think he looks pretty cool. Kind of impactor vibes a little bit there with the head. But yeah, in terms of articulation, the head is on a swivel, so it can just rotate around like that. The arms are just pegged into the side here, so they get a swivel off of that and then can also hinge out to the side like that. He does have a bicep swivel, though, like I said, on one of the arms that's a little bit too tight. Again, it's gotten a lot better, but yeah, see, that can happen sometimes, which is a bit annoying. He has a double jointed elbow, which is kind of weird that he has these big shoulder chunks, and he actually can get a fairly decent curl out of it. Although I would say it looks a little bit weird because his, you know, upper arms are so much bigger compared to his lower arms, but you know, it still works. He has that wrist swivel for transformation, though it is kind of offset because of how it, you know, fits into the truck mode, but not the end of the world. It's got a waist swivel there. Hips can go forward and back and out to the side. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't actually have a thigh swivel. He has a below the knee swivel. So you can rotate it around to kind of like, you know, oop, there goes his arm. You can rotate it around to kind of like adjust his stance here. But if you bend it at the knee, it only, you know, actually, no, I take that back. I guess that is kind of that does function as a traditional thigh swivel. But yeah, no, so that works pretty well. He's got 90 degrees of bend at the knee there, and then the feet can kind of, you know, depending on how you have this armature oriented, they can rotate forward a tiny bit more if you don't have that bit in there, back a lot for transformation, and then also be able to tilt out to the side. So yeah, pretty decent articulation there. I think like the thing that tripped me up about the thigh swivel is that like visually it feels like this sort of knee chunk should move with the bottom part of the leg, but no, that does function as a normal thigh swivel, so I take that back. That does not have you know, the below the knee swivel problem. But yeah, no, it looks pretty good in his robot mode, I think. In terms of comparisons in this mode, before we get onto his whole sort of like modulator thing, here he is again with Kingdom Sideswipe. So as you can see, pretty, you know, average size Deluxe there, maybe a smidge taller than Sideswipe, but they look good together. Here he is again with Off-Road, just because we showed them off together before. And here he is with Studio Series wreck-gar. Now I've left Scrap Heap or Scrapyard or whatever his Junkyard, Junk Heap, whatever his name is, in his alt mode here, so we can actually show off how well he can ride the Studio Series Junkions here. And it works fairly well. He can get enough range on his knees here, and then he does have wrist swivels, which is important for getting them to actually ride the motorcycle mode. So you can get his hands on here. I'd say the one big joint that he's lacking to make this look better is an upward neck swivel. So he's always kind of looking down here a little bit. Also, because he's a Deluxe and these guys are Voyagers, he does really have to spread his legs out to the side, which looks a little bit strange from the front. But overall, I'd say that works fairly well. It isn't too difficult to get him on there. And, with chunky robots riding chunky bikes, it's always going to look a little bit cluttered and silly. So I think that all things considered, that works pretty well. Now, in terms of, also, it just for fun, I didn't really feel like putting him in his bike mode to show him off with the other ones, but here he is with a previous Junkion from the Generations line, who I kind of feel like now that we've got some ones that aren't the Studio Series ones as well, I might reincorporate him into my Junkions, because I think he fits well enough with them without, he's not wreck-gar, so he kind of fits in. But yeah, his color scheme is maybe a little bit less brown and orange than the other ones, but I think he still fits in with them. But yeah, so I also wanted to bring on Ironworks, and I didn't feel like taking Paleotrex out of the combined mode, so here's Skelevore. But because I feel like the one area in which you can actually use the modulator gimmick with him is like swapping out body parts with him in robot mode. Like you could, for example, take Ironworks' arm here and give him appropriately a hook, so you could do that, and I think that looks fairly good. I feel like that the proportions there work kind of well, and similarly you could do another thing with like some of the fossilizer guys. I think it would look better with Paleotrex, not Skelevore, but I think that looks pretty cool. I don't know that these arms really look as good on the other guys, but there's lots of creative things that you could do with mixing and matching here and doing stuff like that. As usual with the modulators, the legs all kind of like attach at different spots, so like you could do this, but I don't. Oh no, actually you can't, because 2 hole connections there. You could do that for whatever that's worth. Like I said, it's like you could do some fun things with combining this guy with other modulators to a more dramatic extent, but it's just a little bit underwhelming, I'd say, in terms of like all the functionality that these other guys had, being able to like put them in different modes and like really spend a lot of time turning them into weapons and stuff like that. Because when you take him, like we can bring on Sideswipe here, you can do some weapon stuff. Like they advertise you like taking the bottom pieces here and using these as like the like feet plug-ons that a lot of these guys usually have, and I don't think that the arms really work super well for that. I'm not doing it exactly like they put it in the instructions, but just to get the gist here, like yeah, I don't think that looks quite as good as like the foot add-ons. And then usually they just want you to take these bits and just kind of fold them up and plug them into the shoulders, as depending on what figure you're plugging them into, your success may vary. I guess usually they have it kind of the other way around. And again, that's like functionally, like what is that actually doing to power up Sideswipe? It's just giving him like big shoulder pads. Like what does that actually accomplish? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously you can give him the little like weapon bits so he can hold weapons, or give him the spare tire, and it looks kind of cool, I guess. I just can't imagine like functionally like what this is actually for. And unlike like some of the modulators also have this issue where they're just like parts that don't really have a great place to go. Like the entire body section, I feel like you don't really have anything to do with it, because this in and of itself doesn't really turn into a good weapon or anything. Like I said, the whole modulator thing with him, I think really is meant to be for the vehicle mode and mixing and matching the vehicle mode with other like Junkion modulators specifically. So I don't think it works super well in terms of like the modulator gimmick compared to some of the previous ones. And like I said, you know, I feel like it'll get better and more playable once we actually get more of these new Junkions. But as of right now, it's just a little bit underwhelming. But also, that being said, he also does just have a clean transformation that doesn't do any parts forming. So if you want to ignore the modulator gimmick and just treat him as his own figure that has, you know, no like interconnectivity with other figures, I think he's still pretty cool. So yeah, like I said, he's probably, it's either him or Needle Nose are my favorite in the new wave here. I think that, you know, the one big issue I have with him structurally is just those elbows, and even that is not a huge deal, but that is the one thing that, you know, makes me like Needle Nose a little bit more, just because all of his joints are really solid. But either way, I'd say that those two are kind of the winners of the wave here, and the other two are, you know, all right. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to them. If you enjoy my videos, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing. I do reviews every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. And without further ado, here we have Transformers Generations Legacy Evolution Scraphook.